Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about things important to your soul. As always, we ask you to like us, subscribe, and maybe even support us on Patreon. All of that helps keep us on the air. So today's guest is pretty local here to Pittsburgh. She's in Monroeville, Pennsylvania. Her name is Dr. Elisa Haransky-Beck, and she's been practicing functional, behavioral, developmental optometry, specializing in vision and movement therapy since she graduated from the Pennsylvania College of Optometry in 1987. She's a fellow in the College of Optometrists in Vision Development, which is now the Optometrist in Vision Development and Rehabilitation Association, and a member of the American Optometric Association and the Pennsylvania Optometric Association. She holds an MA in Spiritual Nutrition Vegan and Live Food Nutrition from the University of Integrated Science of California. Sounds like something they'd have in California. And she has certificates in Expanding Culinary Joy, Mastering Rainbow, Green Live Food Cuisine, the Conscious Eating Program from the Dr. Cousens Tree of Life Center, U.S. Vegan Live Food Trainings in 2015. She also attended the Incredible Life Transformation Program at the Hippocrates Health Institute in 2012. She and her husband, attorney Stan Beck, have two amazing daughters, Rachel and Laura. Mm-hmm. And with that, Dr. Elisa, I'm going to ask that you trace for us your spiritual journey from childhood until now, and then we'll get into your book. So the mic's all yours.
So you're just giving me a small question. I'm to trace my spiritual journey from birth or from before birth?
Well, you get to pick. Some people start before birth. But you can start that anywhere you want.
So I suppose the way I'll frame it is I've come to believe and understand that we choose our parents or our situation and arrive on this planet in physical form in wonder. Well, in my case, in wonder, in joy, in exploration, in curiosity, to fulfill whatever mission it is that we decided to come here for. And I think in my 65 years of physical existence in this form, that's a beautiful question you're asking that I've never really considered kind of as a whole piece. So I just am going to take a breath for a moment. You could take a breath with me, whether your name is Dr. Bob or you're listening to this, whenever and wherever you are. And maybe ponder the question for yourself. What is a spiritual journey? Because from my perspective, we're spirit beings, we're light beings, we're electric beings. And I know that I came in with a lot of curiosity. I came into a family of a blended family, it used to be called, in the 1960s. I was born in 61, where my mother and father had both been married and divorced, married each other, and then I came through. And I was raised, my parents are both Jewish. So in terms of organized religion, they had, at that point in their lives, my mother was about 40 when I was born. My father was about 50. They had kind of moved beyond organized religion. So I was raised in a Jewish household, which I realized much later was a form of kosher, meaning we didn't eat meat and milk together. So a strict Orthodox Jew has two sets of dishes, a milk set, milchik, and a meat set, fleishik. We didn't have two sets of dishes in that way. We had two sets of dishes, but one was kind of a more formal. We had three sets of dishes. One was a more formal set of dishes that was used for example, the holiday of Passover. But it was also used for other occasions, like when my parents invited people over for dinner. So I grew up, I believe, in a household in some ways that was devoid of what I refer to now as spirituality. And it was definitely devoid of formal religious practice, as in going to synagogue, because my parents didn't do that unless it was a high holiday. And it was, we would usually go to Baltimore, where my sister, who moved into Orthodoxy, was. If I ever went to a religious institution, it was an Orthodox Jewish congregation. Mm-hmm. And so, or maybe a conservative congregation with my friends on occasion, locally, where I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I didn't really discover my own Judaism until I met, I'm going to fast forward now to Dr. Gabriel Cousens in 2015. So in 2012, perhaps, I started a form of spiritual journey through moving into raw living foodism as a practice. At the Hippocrates, I said in my book, Health Institute, it's now called Hippocrates Wellness in Florida, where I transformed from being a carnist, eating chickens and fishes and cows and eggs and milk, to just eating plants, just eating raw living foods, salads, sprouts. That was transformational. It was shocking. It was magnificent. And I can talk more about that later if you'd like. But then 3 years later, I discovered Dr. Gabriel Cousens at the Tree of Life Rejuvenation Center. It was called at the time. It's no longer in existence. It was there for 25 years in Patagonia, Arizona. I went there for what I thought was one day, for my favorite Jewish holiday, which is Tu B'Shvat, the holiday of the trees, when the almond trees bloom in Israel. And I wound up staying for 3 weeks for his life transformation program. Again, I dove into a different dimension. We experienced, those of us who were there during those 3 weeks in that program, we experienced raw living foodism, meditation 3 times a day, walking labyrinth, saunas, just connection to myself and others in ways that I had never experienced in my lifetime. And Dr. Cousens has written 10 books, one of which is Torah, which is the Bible, Torah, the Old Testament, as a guide to enlightenment. And he goes through in that book each week. There's a parsha in the way that a lot of Jewish people and maybe others do Bible study. In Judaism, the weekly parsha, the weekly part of the Torah or Bible, was written about. He wrote about it in his book in a way that I had never seen. To me, that was my discovery of the spirituality of where Judaism really came from, the Essenes. So I consider myself on many levels a modern living Essene on one hand, I consider myself a Jewish woman on one hand, and I consider myself a spiritual being that transcends organized religion, organized groups of any kind, because I've come to the conclusion, and this is a conclusion of an N equals one, me, you obviously draw your own conclusions, that we are spiritual beings. Every single one of us, no matter what our path is, was, has been, will be, we are here to thrive. We are here to be in love, not only with ourselves, but with this. Dr. Bob asked me, is that a real background or is that just a backdrop? And so I might have to go pull a leaf off of that cherry tree right over there to show you. This is southwestern Pennsylvania in the peak of beautiful springtime, which happens to have something to do with rain. So Bob could probably tell you it was raining earlier today, but I'm trusting that it's not going to rain for the next 45 minutes. I don't think it's supposed to, but that's why the light is so even. And we are light beings. And I have come to appreciate in my natural eyesight improvement practice that I work with on a moment-to-moment basis, that all natural light is so important for our body's electric, is so important for the receptors of our eyes. To receive natural light for at least several hours a day is part of my ability to be a more fully spiritual being. So I guess maybe that's it in a nutshell. I answered the question in a way I'd never answered any question that I'd never heard before. So I hope that that was, what you were thinking about. But you could ask me any more questions about any part of my journey, because I left out, some decades in between.
Well, that was fairly thorough. I'm curious about a couple things. Actually, I'm curious about a lot, but we'll get into that later. But regarding your spiritual journey, one is, how do your parents feel about where you have landed spiritually and your spiritual beliefs?
So my parents, may they rest in peace, I believe were curious often about the choices I was making when I was going to study beyond optometry school, because that's a big deal, right? Professional school.
Yeah.
I love the earth. I love connecting with the earth. I have bare feet right now. I love grounding with my bare feet into the earth. I love to plant plants and trees and native plants and trees and bushes. And I love to be out in nature. And I remember very clearly, actually, my father, may he rest in peace, he was a pharmacist who didn't believe in drugs unless absolutely necessary, and didn't take any until he was about 100. He took a heart medication. He believed in heart medication and antibiotics. Those are the two that he said, well, if somebody needs that, it could really save their lives. But he was sitting here on this deck. This is, our backyard. He was sitting on this deck watching me over there, and maybe later I'll pick up the camera and show you. Recently, on March 21st, right in March, I created a labyrinth in our backyard with an old wood pile. But that wasn't there then when he was alive, but he was sitting here and he was looking at me over there. I was digging in the dirt, and he said, what are you doing? You're acting like a farmer. Are you, what are you, a farmer? Are you a rabbit eating grass? Because I love to eat sprouts, and I was more of a curiosity, I think. my parents had moved beyond organized religion because, in their view, they saw a lot of inconsistencies, I'll say, to be kind, where people were theoretically supposed to be following a book, whatever it might be called, that book, that holy book. But what they were actually doing in their real lives, other than when they were actively at a temple or a mosque or a synagogue or a whatever church they were part of, they were doing very different things in their real lives. And so my parents just didn't get it. My father, right before he died in 2015, and for the couple of years before that, you know, he would wear a head covering, a yarmulke, when he was staying at my sister's house in Baltimore. And then he didn't do that when he was at our house in Monroeville. He would move back and forth every 6 months towards the end of his life, and between our two homes. And but I think he started to understand more deeply the importance of the connection of family and the spiritual dimensionality, perhaps, of just the mysteries of life. But my mother kind of, I don't want to say made fun of, but she was very judgmental about orthodoxy in my religion, and in all religions. And so now that you ask that question, it helps me to realize that my parents' religion, in a way, if you will, was earning a living, and, you know, putting their kids through school and making sure that their children were provided for. And so, but culturally, they modeled for me, and I followed to a large degree the ways they ate. You know, I would never mix milk and meat when I was eating meat and drinking milk, because it just didn't seem right, because that's the way I was raised. So they carried on the cultural traditions in many ways. They never observed the Sabbath. Saturday, I went to ballet class on Saturdays. We did everything what we wanted to do on Saturdays and on Sundays.
Yeah.
I went to Sunday school, you know, but it wasn't a Sunday school like a really intense Sunday school. It was a Yiddish Hebrew school. And when I started, my Yiddish was my parents' secret language. When I started to learn what they were saying, they stopped speaking it.
That's interesting. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your approach to your profession, which I would say you describe as holistic. That you look at a patient, you look at a client from a holistic medical point of view, but beyond medical, just looking at mind, body, spirit, as well as physical, and then looking at how those different aspects of the person affect their eyesight, but not just their eyesight, their vision. So it would be helpful for the audience to understand how you differentiate eyesight from vision, and what that means, and how that forms your approach to the work that you do.
That's my favorite question. So thank you. Thank you for asking it. And that's the reason that I was called to write a book, which was published in 2024, as you know, that you have beautifully displayed on your desk. Thank you. And I have a copy right here on a little book stand. I'm going to open my book here and look at the table of contents. The second chapter is called Exploring Vision, Eyesight, and Beyond. The third chapter is called Considering Typical Eye Care Through a Wider Lens. And the fourth chapter is called A Look at Holistic Eye Care. And the fourth chapter is one of 17 chapters. My book is in 5 parts. And in my view, the whole book is about vision. The whole book is about our beings as visual, sensory, somatic beings. And I'm actually going to take a chance and not back up to what conventional eye care is to describe that, because I think that probably most of the people listening or watching have had an eye exam, or at least I hope they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
To rule out disease, to rule out, something that really could develop into something that's not so good. So that's really important, to go to an eye doctor and have an eye exam every couple of years. That being said, or you'll be followed by a specialist in glaucoma or cataracts or diabetes, to be followed by a general optometrist or an ophthalmologist. That being said, and I was always very good at diagnosing pathology, disease. I never wanted to treat it. In fact, optometry grew out of the jewelry industry, right? Eyeglasses as jewelry. And optometrists, when I was in optometry school, I was a Maryland resident at the time. I remember very clearly that was it, when optometrists were pursuing the right, if you will, to use eye drops to dilate people's pupils so that they could get a bigger view of the peripheral part of the retina, the back of the eye, right? You can get one view if you look directly in with a light, but a much wider view once the pupil, the dark part of your eye, around where the iris is, if the iris can be dilated artificially with a pharmaceutical agent, you can get an easier view, right? There's a lot of technology now that can often get around that. The cameras that take pictures through even a small pupil can get around that, so you don't need the drops in many cases. That being said, shame on me, because it's called a dilated fundus exam. Dilated pupil exam is actually something that's required of somebody that's a licensed eye care professional. They need to dilate the patient's eyes. It's what's part of what we're supposed to do legally, right? But aside from the mainstream dream that we've been taught as truth, I just became really interested in natural eyesight improvement. So I specialized from an early, from a young optometric age. I graduated, I guess, when I was 26 from optometry school after 4 years of undergrad, majoring in biology and ecology. I became really interested in prevention and in either stopping eye disease or reversing it. And these are things that I specialized. I did a rotation through the pediatrics clinic. I did a rotation with 2 optometrists in Reading, Pennsylvania at the time, that specialized in what's called optometric vision therapy, which is a form of natural eyesight improvement. So that was where I started in optometry school, and I became enamored with what's called optometric vision therapy, where I would see patients weekly in my office. First, it was in Swissvale, which is a Pittsburgh town, and then in Squirrel Hill for many years. And I would see patients weekly and work with them on their tracking ability. Can I move my eyes smoothly across a page of print that I'm reading? Can I easily track and move my eyes, my focus, my depth perception from one point in space to another point in space while I'm driving? And that would be called dynamic visual acuity, dynamic depth perception, meaning you're moving when you're driving. You might know people that they're great people, but they don't want to drive. And don't tell them they need to learn to drive because they're just not comfortable driving. 9 times out of 10, in my experience, it's because those people don't use their eyes together as a team. They don't have good tracking ability or depth perception. So of course they don't want to drive. They're going to be terrified on the road because things don't look the way that they're happening in real time and space when your visual system is not working in a coordinated way so that you can use your sense of vision. Okay, and I'm talking so far pretty much about the external aspect of it. I mean, we could break this down in 100 different ways, this conversation. I'm trying to do it in a simple way that makes sense. That was my classical optometric vision therapy training. And I practiced, I learned a lot from an optometrist who actually, interestingly, was from Pittsburgh originally, but started to work with the George Washington University Reading Center in Washington, D.C., named Harry Wax. Do you know that name, Dr. Bob?
No, I don't. No.
Okay, so Harry Wax was an optometrist in Pittsburgh. He had a private practice in Oakland, another town in Pittsburgh, right in the middle, smack in the middle of the medical establishment, the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. But his was a private practice. He was an expert in contact lenses and vision, optometric vision therapy, working with children and adults, like I did for my whole career, with vision-related learning issues, post-traumatic brain injury, post-stroke patients, people whose visual spatial world was either never properly developed, if you will, or they had stellar visual systems with great depth perception, great visual acuity, meaning how clearly you can read things up close, books, computers, iPads, street signs, all the things. He was right in the middle of the medical establishment, and he was a strong character. He moved to the Washington, D.C. area, worked at the George Washington University Reading Center, and when I got out of optometry school in 1987, I worked with him for several years there as a vision therapist. And he was brilliant. He was a brilliant practitioner. He didn't have all the conventional equipment. He worked in the reading center of George Washington University. He would have patients. We used our handheld equipment. I'm just smiling broadly because I don't know how many of my colleagues even use that equipment anymore because there's so many bells and whistles of electronics that I don't even know what my colleagues exactly are doing these days. There's just a couple that are definitely using handheld pieces of equipment. But he would have patients in the hallway of the reading center, a narrow hallway, and he would have them stand across from him, and he would be shining his ophthalmoscope, the piece of instrumentation that you use to look at the retina, at the lens of a person's eye, at their eyelids in a magnified manner, at their optic nerves, at their blood vessels, to see if they have any changes there. And then he would take out his retinoscope, which is the light that we use, some of us at least, that helps us look at how a person focuses. We look at their lens, the flexibility of the very strong lens that each person, if they have lenses in their eyes, which most people do, how it focuses. And you can see color changes, and you can see how a person is attending. You can see their attention. You can see if they're moving and using both of their eyes together. But he would do all this in the hallway, okay? And then he had each of us vision therapists put together in a little bin that you could carry around, a little case that had a few lenses in it, a few blocks in it, a few other things that were with prisms. We would have our little prisms in there. And we would move with patients sometimes from room to room. There were 3 or 4 rooms. with tables, and we would take our little cases in there. I learned a lot from him. I used to kind of stand behind him over his shoulder and watch what he was doing. And I took what I learned from him from optometry school in the specialty rotations that I did for 6 months. And I also learned from I learned from various coursework, additional coursework after optometry school, that there is so much more to vision than straight eyesight. Now, when most eye doctors prescribe eyeglass lenses for you, they're looking at your visual acuity mainly, meaning, can you see? I mean, some eye doctors don't even do this anymore, but can you see to read a book, or at the distance where your computer screen is? Can you see the eye chart across the wall? 10 feet away, 20 feet away, 5 feet away, however the dark room is set up. So most of my colleagues work in darkness a lot of the time. Most of my colleagues do eye exams in dark rooms most of the time. They may turn a light on when they're checking near vision, an artificial light. These days, who knows what kind of light it is and what it's doing to your body, right? I loved it. I love everything I always did. But I've reached a point now in my career where I am so interested in the connection between vision, insight, spirituality, movement practices, wellness, prevention, and reversal of not only individuals' dis-ease, but the dis-ease of Mother Earth. Mother Earth is screaming loudly, and Mother Earth here is singing loudly. I don't know if you can hear the birds. Can you hear the birds, Dr. Bob?
I cannot. No.
And that is probably because we're on Zoom and there's kind of a certain setting or something you'd probably have to put, to be able to hear the birds. But because when I make live videos on Facebook or Instagram, you can hear the birds often. I go into the woods, and I like to play, and I understand that to rise, as we rise into our full human nature, and I spell human intentionally in the book sometimes, by the way, Humyn.
I've seen that, yes.
God bless. If you want to look up after this podcast, you want to look up Jacob Lieberman, one of my colleagues. I had a number of people. You'll see at the beginning of the book, there's like 23 praise fours, right? But I sent a number of people my manuscript, and he was one of them. And he sent me the manuscript back in short order after he'd looked at the first, dozen or 24 pages. And he said, "You need an editor." And he crossed out Humyn and he changed it to Human. And I never heard from him again after that about my book, right? One of these days I'm going to mail him one. And I'm going to highlight Humyn where I used it, because then what happened in the editing process was the editors at Balboa Press took out every Humyn and changed it to Human.
Uh-huh.
And I almost lost it because I didn't know how to do all these replacement, you press one button and you can change the whole thing. I didn't know how to do that. And I wound up going through the whole manuscript again to change it back. And then as I was changing it back, I thought, what is this really about? Balboa Press apologized up and down, backwards and standing on their head. They said, the editor is our senior editor. She's like the best, but she's older. And she just automatically did that. What is it to be human in this three-dimensional, incredible, miraculous form? What does it mean to have this opportunity, this golden opportunity. How many lifetimes have we been through, perhaps? How many planets or cosmos or universes have we been part of? How did we really get here 200,000 years ago? You know, Greg Braden's talking about this now. Many others are talking and positing and showing evidence that we're not necessarily natives to this planet, right? And I listened to just, I have to admit, Dr. Bob, part of one of your podcast interviews, it was excellent, but I'm not sure to what degree you want me to dive into otherworldliness, but I used to be more on the kind of frame of atheist, or my father used to say he's agnostic. If you prove to him there's a God, he'll believe it. I used to kind of be more like that, but now I am completely surrendered, I hope, as much as possible. God, Spirit Source is saying to me right now, you know what? Just don't say you hope. Just like shut up and just take it
Yeah.
in. Allow yourself to be that empty vessel. And as we transcend the artificiality of what we've been taught in all these books, okay, I'm still going to put a plug in for my book because I believe in this. Because why? Because it's been out for several years now. I published in April or so of 2024. I should have had a 2-year anniversary party. Maybe I will. People have told me that when they read the book, when they're done, or even during it, because there are experiential explorations, their eyesight improves.
All right. I have to tell you a story. Because I was so deep into your book this past week, and I was reading your philosophy on eyesight, and synchronistically this morning the lens fell out of my glasses. And it would not go back in and be secure. Now, normally I had a 7 a.m. Rotary meeting to get to, and it was raining, as you mentioned this morning. Normally, I would have just canceled my plans and thought, okay, I can't drive like this. Instead, because I was reading your book, I told myself, I bet I can drive without my glasses. Because I have progressive lenses, but most of what I use them for is for reading. My distance vision is fairly good. So
I'm glad to hear that.
So I got in my car in the rain and drove. It was just 10 minutes to my meeting. Had no problem with my vision, could read all the signs. My depth perception was great. And I went to that meeting. Then I drove to Monroeville, where you live, to go to Lens Crafters without my glasses on, with no problem. And when I got there, I had a conversation with them about our interview today and meeting with you, and they said, oh, please tell her we're hiring. If she, we need more optometrists. And I said, well, you may not like her because she works on convincing people and working with them to cure their eyesight issues. And they said, no, we want anyone we can get. So anyway, a synchronistic story. And, over 40 years, I've been wearing glasses. That's the first time a lens has fallen out that I could not just pop right back in.
Okay, so I'm just like, I'm going to pause here for a second and just absorb the moment. because thank you so much for sharing that story. This is life and this is experience, and this is what's possible. Okay. So, I'm too curious now. I'm too curious. Can I ask you a few questions, Dr. Bob?
Sure. Sure.
So you didn't, like, growing up, did you wear glasses just for reading?
Probably not until I hit late 30s, early 40s.
So you are a perfect candidate for, dare I say it, in a podcast that's going to go around the world, for letting go of your glasses, perhaps in a gradual fashion, because you're a few years older than 30. What about the idea that you could work with the idea, play with the idea, learn some classical eye exercises, learn some of the Bates method, learn some natural eyesight improvement techniques, not only to lessen your eyeglass prescription, so lens crafters, all the other places, and conventional eye doctors of all stripes can know. It turns out that practitioners like me prescribe more glasses often. Why? Because I'm going to give you some unsolicited professional advice. And what's that advice? Try to reduce, when the next time you go to your eye doctor for an exam, say, "Hey, doc," first hand them a copy of my book. And I'm not kidding, because, well, I'll tell that story in a minute if you want me to, but I've gotten myself in trouble by offering this advice because most of my colleagues won't accept the idea that visual acuity can improve. They just don't accept it. They think it's a bunch of nonsense. But why? Because they don't practice it themselves. So they don't, it's not their truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not their understanding of themselves or the other or the cosmos. So, oh boy, I think we might have to have a series of podcasts here, because I'm realizing I can go on for a year with this conversation.
Well, I felt that you gave me a real gift just by reading as much of your book as I did at this point, and I had the confidence to say, I can do this. There's no doubt in my mind I can do this. And
But what's so interesting, I have to interject a disclaimer here. Not everybody is Dr. Bob. Okay, what Dr. Bob just told me, and what I understand, because I've been at this for a while, is he is somebody whose visual system is very tuned. To begin with, he never wore glasses until he was 30. He is a prime candidate for natural eyesight improvement. For me, his case as a patient is just, I'm not going to say a piece of cake. I'm going to say many green sprouts. Very easy and wonderful and nutritious and a breeze, right? You put a seed in the ground and it sprouts. But God's Spirit Source was working with us today. Why? Because God's Spirit Source knew that Dr. Bob had to lose a lens to convince him.
right.
Dr. Bob is unique, right? If you're a nearsighted person or a farsighted person or somebody with strabismus or amblyopia, and if you are, you'll know what those words mean. Don't get back on behind the wheel when you lose a lens or don't just go take off your glasses, okay? Dr. Bob could do that because of what his visual history is that he's shared. And what I can glean, and this is the first conversation we've ever had about this, but I have enough background and experience. So when people come to me for a private consultation, I'm working mostly on Zoom with people around the world. I tell them first, before you come to me for a consultation, go get an eye exam with a professional licensed practitioner, because I have not had a physical office since 2018. I got my master's degree in spiritual nutrition in 2019. And then I thought I was going to publish my book, my master's thesis. That was 2019. I hired the publisher, Balboa Press, in June of 2019. And I sent them my manuscript of my master's thesis on spiritual nutrition. And they sent it back to me, and I looked at what they sent back to me. I tell people now, I'm not a writer, I'm an author, but I had to work with an editor, right? They sent the manuscript back to me, and I looked at all of their comments, the global edit or whatever it's called, and I thought, it will take me the next 10 years to update this in the way that they're suggesting. So then I hired a private editor, because those were all the services that was in my package. And I worked with that editor, and then it was early 2020. You remember early 2020? I was scheduled in April of 2020 to speak at a somatics, a movement conference, about the reflexes that underlie vision development. And of course, that was canceled. It was in California, and that never happened. That conference never happened. But I started working with the editor, because that was my project. Now, I didn't have much else to do. I was editing my book. Actually, I did take a course in between. I took some time off writing, but I told my editor, I want to, she said, just write a quick ebook on nutrition, because people are hungry to be healthy and boost their immune system. So I said, okay. So I write this quick ebook on my master's thesis was supposed to be on reversing diabetic retinopathy using the raw living foods lifestyle. That's a mouthful. What does it mean? People that have diabetes, whether they have diabetes from a young age, or they acquire the disease when they're older, it can potentially cause blindness, because the blood vessels in the back of our eyes are the most delicate and tiny blood vessels in our whole body. And when they become leaky, it's a problem. It's a big problem. And so I was very excited to this was with Dr. Gabriel Cousens. I signed up for his master's program, which is a 2-year program. The first year, you read 100 books and write 13 3 to 5 page papers. I was into it. I was starting to do that. And then he lost his funding 3 months in. So I pivoted, and he's already, one of his 10 books already is about reversing diabetes, but he doesn't write about eyes in his book. So he was excited. I was excited. And when he lost his funding, I pivoted, and I wound up writing my thesis on the range of veganism, from raw living foodism to junk food veganism, because it may or may not be obvious, but the way you eat has everything to do with the way you see. So I write this quick ebook, and then I'm looking at the manuscript, and I'm like, I'm not writing any more than one book. This can't be my book. This cannot be my book. I have to write some other things in my book. And then my editor said, oh, you need to write something about vision, because most eye doctors are not like you. There are, with all due respect, there are other eye doctors. None of us are exactly the same, but, natural eyesight improvement and eye doctors, that's a thing. So I wrote that part. And then I thought, well, I have to write about my movement practices, because I'm a somatic movement educator, therapist, a yoga teacher. I have all kinds of movement certifications. I wanted to be a professional ballerina. I grew too tall, or maybe I wasn't quite talented enough, as my classmate Susan Jaffe, who was a prima ballerina with American Ballet Theater and is now their artistic director. But in any case, I had to write about movement. I had to write about vision. I'd already written the nutrition part. And then I had to write about nature, something. And I'm going to leave my nature section a mystery because it may not be what you think if you're somebody in the region or world who knows my work in sustainability and the regenerative future. It's not what you might think.
Yeah.
And then it was spirit. This is us, the way, one of my mantras. Did you see the bird flying by just now?
I did.
Behind me?
Yes.
Okay, so keep it up, birdies. Let's do some tracking activities because Dr. Bob and the listeners can't hear you, but they can see you.
No. I have bird feeders in my front yard and my backyard.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we have I'm going to digress for a minute. We have a permaculture landscape. Permaculture is short for permanent agriculture. And what that means is 30 years ago when we moved into this house, 33 years ago, when we moved into this house in Monroeville, we planted trees and perennials, meaning they come back every year, that support wildlife and human life. So we planted apple trees and asparagus. And now we have pawpaws in the front, which are natives to southwestern PA. We have dogwoods. We have tulip, poplar, maple, black walnut. We provide naturally for the birds, and that's why there's so many birds. I don't have a bird feeder, but we are feeding the birds and ourselves through what we plant. But I forgot the other story I was telling, so you're going to have to put me back on track, Dr. Bob.
Well, we just got to spirit, but I wanted to talk about your movement section because in a previous podcast, episode 67 that aired back in April of 2024, I had Sarah Silk on the program. And at the time, Sarah was the only Feldenkrais instructor in all of the Pittsburgh area. In fact, I think in all of southwestern Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if you've heard of her. I've gone to her classes. So when I saw that Feldenkrais was part of your book, I thought, aha, I know what she's talking about there.
Beautiful. So I don't know Sarah Silk yet, but I'm going to have to look her up. So when I wrote the book, I didn't yet write in there much about, you may remember the reference to Eleanor Criswell Hanna and Hanna's somatics. While I was writing the book, and actually more like editing the book, I'd already written the book, but I was editing. And that was a real interesting process, right? Going back and forth. It was all virtual, right? By email. I was in several different trainings in somatics. I already was certified. You may or may not know Mark Taylor. Do you know Mark Taylor?
No, I don't.
Mark Taylor has created the School for Body-Mind Movement in the lineage of Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen of Body-Mind Centering fame. She is incredible. She was, I'm going to say, my first somatics teacher, movement teacher in that way. She's now 83 or 84, I think, and she's still teaching online, like weekly. I'm enrolled in, I took every one of her courses online since 2020. I used to go to her. Okay, I'm going to back up a minute. I'm giving you the history, by the way, of where Feldenkrais fits into this puzzle. Mm-hmm. So when I got out of optometry school in 1987, I was a burnt out individual. I was exhausted. I mean, professional school was not, in my view, a healing experience. Professional school, I now understand, at least the way that it still is, I believe, is abusive. And we were pretty much given I mean, the first semester of the four-year optometry school program, we had to take 6 classes, 6 science classes: ocular biology, theoretical optics, physiological optics, ocular biology, neuroanatomy, optics. Okay, so for me at least, I mean, I had a science background, but I didn't have a physics background. I didn't have, we took biochemistry also the first semester. I had never taken biochemistry in undergrad. I took chemistry, organic and inorganic, but I was not prepared. And the first year almost killed me. I mean, I couldn't even, it was just like I had no time for anything. I skied, and I couldn't go skiing with my friends on the weekends because I had to study. It was crazy, right? So I think that I'm losing my train of thought again, I'm realizing. Just like, I think God is just saying, slow down for a minute. You don't have to tell every story the whole time. Okay, Feldenkrais. How does Feldenkrais fit into this? I designed my optometry apartment, which was just like an efficiency, as a dance studio. And I would just dance around while I was studying because I had to move. I knew that. Then when I graduated in 1987, I somehow came across the work of Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. There was a magazine at the time called Contact Quarterly, Contact Improvisation. Do you know Contact Improvisation, Dr. Bob?
No.
Contact improvisation is a form of movement where you're actually literally connecting with other bodies. And it's a dance form, really. Usually it's dancers playing, moving, body to body. The dance company Pilobolus models that in their performances. So I came across Bonnie Cohen, I think maybe through that magazine, from an integrative bookstore, holistic bookstore in the Washington, D.C. area. I think I may have looked her up. I may be making up this story. I don't even know how I came across her. And I took her 1-week developmental movement course. This was 1988, 89 in Amherst, Massachusetts, in a giant gym at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. There were about 100 people in there with these giant physio balls. I have still 2 physio balls in my family room that I bought back then that I still play with. They're big, giant exercise balls, if you will. We were rolling across them, but we started out, we spent 7 days on the floor. We stayed on the floor until the last 5 minutes of day 7. And we were being development, human development. We started out as cells with cellular breathing on the floor in this giant gym. We were all breathing as a cell. So imagine 100 people on the floor of a gym with this consciousness, whose name is Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, setting the awareness level, the tone, the consciousness, setting the collective consciousness. This is back in 1988, 89. I don't remember exactly which year that was. And then as the week went by, we became tadpoles and fish, the different developmental patterns that an embryo and then fetus goes through in utero, inside your mother's belly. And then we became creeping and crawling creatures. And we learned about the developmental movement patterns that underlie vision development. So I learned that shortly after optometry school from a master named Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, who very much knew about Feldenkrais, who very much worked with many of the masters of movement practices, who knew about Alexander and who knew about Hannah, right? And then fast forward to the 2019, I went to California. and I took practice to study with Peter Grunwald. He wrote a book called I Body. I recommend that book. And if you buy the book, get the pair of pinhole glasses with it. Pinhole glasses were shunned in conventional optometry training and still are in terms of natural eyesight improvement. They're wonderful tools. We use pinholes in conventional eye care exams to test people's visual acuity. If we can't correct, in air quotes, their vision to 20/20, to see if it has to do with them having a cataract or some other anomaly. Anyway, long story short, Peter Grunwald was an Alexander practitioner and developed this eye body practice. He reduced and let go of a tremendous amount of nearsightedness, huge amount of nearsightedness. He doesn't wear glasses now. This is unheard of in my profession, my licensed profession.
Yeah.
This is unheard of in ophthalmology. It's absolutely shunned and made fun of to this moment. Okay, so Feldenkrais, Thomas Hanna, Feldenkrais was Israeli, but taught in the United States. And when he taught in the United States, Thomas Hanna was his American for 3 years, taught with him. He taught the Feldenkrais method with Feldenkrais. And then he developed his own thing, which is heavily Feldenkrais. It's Feldenkrais work, really, but it's Thomas Hanna. And he, I just had to shake an ant off and tell him to go over there. Thomas Hanna developed a very interesting, easy to follow series of 8 practices that he calls the cat stretch. And then in his book, Thomas Hanna's book, Somatics, he thanks Feldenkrais. He describes what somatics is. Thomas Hanna was a philosopher. And then he writes down in the back of his book the practices. I hadn't really studied that to the degree that my certifications brought me to more recently. So I didn't write in detail about that part of my movement background. But I'm teaching that now. I teach it online. If anybody in Pittsburgh wants me to teach it in person, but it's very, very much really rooted in the lineage of Feldenkrais. And my background is also rooted in the lineage of Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. I write about, and Bonnie Cohen looked over my movement section, and she gave me a few, tips that I put in there. She wrote a praise for. I was honored that she said to me, the vision part of all of this in movement practice is yours, Elisa. You're the one who needs to teach this. And that kind of has rolled around in my soma, my body, for many years. And I've come into my own, and I'm very excited about teaching the world that as you start to let go of your glasses in a mindful way, carefully, don't just take your glasses off like Dr. Bob did today and throw them out.
Yeah, because I can tell you that had the police stopped me, my driver's license said I have to have glasses on when I'm driving. So I would have been in trouble.
So just so you know, as time passes, and if you choose, it's all your choice. As you choose natural eyesight improvement practices, and you start to wean yourself, your prescription down, you can step it down, and then you can still have your eyeglasses, and you can have your sprouts and eat them too, right? You can do this.
Yeah.
If you have the will. There is no reason that us as humans, you understand physical therapy, you understand occupational therapy, and I don't mean you, Dr. Bob. I mean all of you.
Yeah.
You were raised up with this language. optometric vision therapy, the way that I practice natural eyesight improvement, integrating natural eye care professionals who are not eye doctors, but follow the Bates method. And we can talk about that another time. This is not only possible, but there are many, many people around the world that are practicing these things, reducing their prescription and letting go of their glasses in many, if not all situations. And so this is a prayer and a vision. And I don't know if what you want to call it. I never call myself a channeler or a mystic or a psychic, but God Spirit Source is saying to all of us now, this is the way to shift your own awareness, your own consciousness. And as you work with you, play with you, sense deeply with you, we shift the collective consciously into love and peace and joy and wonder. And we're already here. I don't know about you, Dr. Bob, but I've been feeling it. We're here. We just have to make the choice to be in here.
And I hate to say it, but we've run out of time. So at the end of each podcast, I do offer the guests an opportunity to leave the audience with a few words of wisdom. It sounds like you just did that, but if you would like to say anything else, this is your opportunity to leave this particular audience with a few words.
Well, I would just like to express my gratitude for your invitation. And I want to express my gratitude to our friend Joan, who who had to prod each of us a little bit because our lives got busy and we forgot to get back in touch a year ago or whenever that was. And I want to express my gratitude for your podcast and your sensibilities and the opportunity that you offer your audience and your friends and I'm sure family to deepen their awareness and open their eyes, literally, their eyes and spirits to the possibilities of being the full human that we are capable of being. So yeah, just that's all. Thank you. Just thank you.
And if people want to get a hold of you for your services, how should they do that?
So you can reach me through my website, which is enliveningconsciousness.com. So as long as you can spell it, you can find me. If you scroll to the bottom of any page, you can also add your name to my e-list. I don't email very often, but like right now, we're running a somatic series you could sign up for. And I do private consultations, but you can reach me through my website, and I'm the one on the other end of it. There's no AI, there's no assistance. I'm it, period, exclamation point. And it's going to be that way for a while right now because of what's going on with AI. And I love it and I honor it. And I'm going to be me for now without the assistance of AI. So Thank you.
Well, audience, as always, take what you've heard and whatever resonates with you, incorporate it into your life and put the rest on the shelf until you're ready to deal with it. And until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.